Welcome to the DIY Writer Show with the mild-mannered, slightly heroic host, Jeff Bacon.
This is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast. Today we have a hell of a treat. We have Alan Baxter. He is one of the best and award-winning Australian horror authors. When you look at the amount of books that he has underneath his Amazon account, it's unbelievable. His latest one, The Gulp, looks very interesting. We're going to have him talk about that a little bit. So without any further ado, Alan, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. Not doing too bad. I'm guessing it's a little warmer down there than it is up here.
Yeah, ceiling fans turning. It's we're just coming into the end of summer now, so it's still hot and muggy right now.
Yeah, it's 9 degrees today.
It's more like 29 here, centigrade.
Oh, Fahrenheit, 9 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
cold. Or
29. I don't know what that is. Your number's like 80 or something.
Yeah, that sounds nice, Alan. Yeah, I've got 3 foot of snow in my front yard.
I miss snow. I grew up in the UK. I kind of miss winter and snow. We never get proper winter here. It gets kind of down to like 5 degrees centigrade.
You grew up in the UK?
Yeah, I was born and grew up in the UK. I started traveling in my mid-20s and ended up in Australia. But so fundamentally, I'm English born and bred, and I've been Australian for 25 years now. So yeah.
Okay. So you consider yourself British, or you consider yourself Australian?
My bio says Brit-Australian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I've been Australian for so long now that it feels like home. But wherever you were born and grew up, is sort of encoded into you in a way. So I think I still have a bit of an English accent that Australians kind of mock sometimes when it comes out. I still say things the English way, not the Australian way. My son always mocks me every time I say bottle instead of bottle. Stuff like that. So yeah, it's still in there. So yeah, I'm always going to be British, but I'm Australian. So I have 2 passports. So I'm literally a dual citizen. So.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. I don't think there's anything you can do to get your son not to make fun of you. I have all daughters, and I've never found any way for them not to make fun of me. They all grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in South Dakota, so I've got a little bit of a different vernacular than they do. But they it's only about 700 miles away from where I grew up, but they have a completely different vernacular on certain things. Like they call water fountains bubblers, and it's soda, it's not pop.
Oh, wow.
It's just weird stuff like that. What's that?
Yeah, Australians call them bubblers, and I'd never heard that before I came out here. They're water fountains in the UK where I come from.
Yeah. They call them bubblers there?
Yeah. I'd never heard anyone else that calls them bubblers. I thought it was an Australian thing.
Yeah, evidently Wisconsin's very close to Australia then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Milwaukee thing. I don't know, but
we have a lot of stuff like that.
What can you tell us about the Gulp?
Yeah, the Gulp. It's it's a bit of a roundabout story to get to it. So I'll do the shortest version I can.
Okay.
A lot of my stuff is sort of set all over the world. Like I wrote a novel called Devouring Dark that's basically a London crime novel. I wrote a novel called Hidden City that's in a fictional American city and stuff like that. Then at the start of last year, more as a joke than anything else, I just wrote this crazy book about a demonic killer kangaroo decimating an outback town in the middle of nowhere, Australia. And people really enjoyed it. It seems to be a very popular book. So I decided, you know what, I should write more Australian stories. And for a long time, I'd had in mind a fictional Australian isolated harbour town, a bit like sort of a Castlerock or a Derry or something like that, a place where I could explore horror and weirdness and return to frequently, have characters and places that crop up. It'd been in mind for a long time, but I'd never really gotten around to writing it. And then people enjoyed the Roo so much, I thought, well, maybe I should build up this sort of Australian mythos I've been thinking about. Mm-hmm. So then it kind of became a bit of a pandemic project that in the first few months of lockdown over here, it was difficult to concentrate on big projects like novel length projects and homeschooling my son and all these other things going on. So I started working on these shorter stories, which eventually became the Gulp, which is sort of 5 novellas, each one about 20,000 words. Each one is an individual story, but sort of overall the 5 kind of make a bit of a mosaic novel. And that ended up coming out as the Gulp. And I figured if it was popular enough, I've got a setting and a jumping off point to write more stories. And if nobody's interested, I just can pretend it never happened. But so far it's been really popular. So I'm really pleased with the reception, and lots of people are going, we want more. So it looks like I have kickstarted, and it's called the Gulp because the fictional town is called Gulpepper, but locals refer to it as the Gulp because it has a habit of swallowing people. And so that's my sort of jumping off point for all sorts of stories set in this weird isolated harbour town.
I love what you said, and if it doesn't work out, I'll just ignore it and pretend it never happened.
Yeah, it happens every once in a while with books. You think, this will be a great series, and book one just doesn't sell you. Okay, maybe it won't be a good series.
Yeah, we'll just pretend that one didn't happen. On to the next.
Yeah.
Very
There's a certain amount of pragmatism required in this business, I think.
I like the fact that you that you base these 5 stories on a harbor town and you're building it up for other novels. That's very interesting on how you did it. I never even made that association with Castlerock. You know that.
I think in some ways with a lot of people it sort of probably happened, maybe accidentally. I think maybe with King he needed a setting for one story and he created Castlerock, and then when he was doing another story he would probably like, oh hey, this could be Castlerock, or he could just reference it. And a career as long as his, with as much work as his, it ends up sort of, building organically almost. But I love, for me, setting is absolutely character. I mentioned Hidden City before, the novel that is in a fictional American city called Cleveland. That whole book is based around the fact that the city is sentient and it's sick, and that's affecting the people and all the sort of weirdness and mayhem that goes on. So effectively the city is the main character of that book. I absolutely love setting. And so sort of consciously deciding to start with setting in this case seemed fairly natural to me. And in some ways it's also, it's not lazy, I suppose, but it's convenient in as much as if I establish this place and I establish certain characters and certain things around it, then it becomes a good point of focus for other stories. So if I have a novel idea that works for a certain type of place and I can tie that into Gulpepper, then I have ready-made, setting, people, places, and also to some degree a ready-made audience. If you can put it out, this is a novel of the Gulp, then people kind of know what's going on. And so you can't, it becomes, in some ways, I'm hoping to periodically release little collections of stories directly set in the Gulp, but otherwise write books and stuff that are sort of peripherally around it, and it just to kind of build a sort of mythos around it as much as anything, to really focus on Australian stories, Australian setting, Australian characters and stuff like that, because it seems there is a real interest for it internationally as well as just here. So it gives me an excuse to keep revisiting a place.
The thing that interests me about Castlerock is how they Salem's lot is due west 10 miles, Jerusalem's lot's due east 10 miles, and Castlerock's right in the middle, and Shawshank is right there and everything else. And the way that they started tying the stories that happen in Castlerock together with stories that King wrote years and years and years ago, as far as a fan goes, you're like, oh my God, that's the city, but I think it's interesting that you're starting.
I really like that.
Yeah.
So, people like King have done the groundwork building that stuff sort of, indirectly. And it's like, well, that's such a good idea. Let's just start right there. And just recently I've been commissioned for a couple of short stories, and in the Gulf, it's kind of isolated on the coast. If you go out from the coast, if you go north, you go to a town called Endon, and south, you go to a town called Moncton. And this is kind of the region I've sort of set. Mm-hmm. And it's all fake, it's all fictional, even though sort of geographically I've more or less mentioned where it is. And just recently I've been commissioned for 2 short stories, and I set one in Endon and one in Moncton. So, I'm just using these places and these these names, so I don't have to use real places, but it also feeds back into, you know, this growing mythos idea. So
And I think that's interesting because the more you build up the Gulp, and the surrounding areas or the region or whatever, the easier it'll be to tie it into other stories. But then on the other hand, you can't change a whole lot.
well, that's true. I mean, you do have to be careful you don't write yourself into a corner. But if things are very much kind of peripheral, but just mention it, then the people that sort of read a lot of your stuff will get that, oh, hey, that's near there, or that was where this happened, or that was where that happened. But otherwise, the stories themselves, with any luck, are sort of standalone and autonomous. So if someone just comes in and reads one story and goes out, they don't miss anything or lose anything. They still get a full story. But for people who have read more of your stuff or followed more of your career, they get a little more out of it. So
Sure.
you know, it kind of works one way without cutting off the other. This is the plan. Whether I pull it off is yet to be seen.
Well, I bet I can't imagine you won't pull it off, but you know, and I love the idea. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. It's interesting, and it's given me something, given me a sort of focus, and it helps to formulate stories. And now, as soon as I'm writing anything or working on anything, there's always in my mind, it's like, could this relate to the Gulf? And if not, then no problem. But if it can, then great. I can, you know, move this here, move this there.
Even if they're just driving through to get gas, you know, I mean, that is so cool. Very cool. I'm kind of sitting here kind of thinking, I don't know. That's just very neat. That is you give me a lot of thought about
where am I going to set my stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you're building that up with short stories or, you know, novellas, and you know, gives a guy like me, like, you know, I'll sit up all night tonight going, okay, how could I do something just like that? You know, but yeah, I won't. My stuff's a little weird.
Well, I'm already working on a novel that would, I wrote a novel last year, and it didn't quite work. I couldn't quite, it's mostly together. There's just a few little sort of hiccups and sort of logic flaws that I need to smooth out to make it work right. And I'm working on a different book at the moment, and the next project is to get back to that one. And I've already realized that I can basically link that to the Gulp. I can change where that's set, and it won't be in the Gulp or any of the other cities. It's just that they will pass through, probably end on their way to where they're going, which just kind of links it into that generalized space. And so, now I can make that just this tenuous link. It just happens nearby kind of thing. But I already know that when I redraft this book to sort of fix it up, that one of the changes will be that. So, yeah.
You know, I think it's absolutely brilliant, because if somebody picks up that book and all of a sudden the Gulp, you know, and if it's intriguing enough, they go look it up. It's like, oh, there's a whole book on the Gulp. Okay. You know, and they get the short stories, and it's brilliant. I love it. You know, I kind of look at Castlerock as something that just kind of formulated out of Stephen King's books, but the way you're using that is brilliant. I absolutely love that. Almost as brilliant as taking a cute little kangaroo and making it evil.
Nothing cute about kangaroo.
There's nothing cute about. We talked about that earlier.
They can be. They're basically the Australian version of deer, but that's just as well, that they just kind of mooch around eating grass, because if they did decide to eat people, like, you know, we'd lose. They're big and strong, and they've got these huge, massive blades on their back feet that they just lean on a tail and kick the shit out of you with them. So, yeah, they're kind of, they can be kind of terrifying. And, you know, I'm 6'2", and I've seen them bigger than me. I've looked up into the eyes of a big red before, so, you know, they can be massive. But,
how big do they get?
That book kind of,
I mean,
I don't know. I've seen when I was many years ago now, I was out in country Victoria, and one came and sort of muscled up. We must have been kind of near its territory or something, where we were camping, and it came and it kind of stood up at me like that, and was taller than I am. I was standing up at 6'2", and it was standing noticeably taller than me, with his big chest and arm.
How tall are
And
you?
I just kind of went and tried to make myself bigger, but it decided not to challenge and just sort of went away again. That's the biggest one I've seen personally. I reckon they probably get bigger.
How tall are you?
6'2".
That's a big, yeah. That's
Yeah, so a 6.5-foot kangaroo easy. I mean, when they stand up on their back legs,
yeah.
like they stretch up, they can. Yeah, but even so, yeah, they're big dudes, or they can be big dudes. The male red kangaroo can be just really like they look like bodybuilders sometimes, and most of them are not that big, but yeah, some of them, most of them are more like sort of 4 or 5 feet at most, but yeah, they can get pretty huge.
It's still, I've seen pictures of them where you're right, they do look like bodybuilders. I mean, they have some massive biceps and triceps. I mean,
Yeah, well, there was a famous group. There was a famous one back in the day whose party trick, he was owned by a farmer, and his party trick was getting steel buckets and just crushing steel buckets against his chest, literally folding them up like a tin can. So I mean, in the opening scene in the Roo is basically based on that, but with a dude's head instead of a bucket. But
no kidding. I've never. So there's videos out there of a kangaroo crushing steel buckets. Nice.
Yeah.
I'll have to, do that during my research.
The kangaroo's got a name. I can't remember what its name was now, but his name was like Duncan or something. I can't remember, but yeah, he's pretty famous, big red.
Cool beans. So, how many books do you have out?
That's a good question. I should know, shouldn't I? Yeah, I think. Well, I co-write with David Wood. So he and I sort of write some action adventure books and some sort of monster thrillers. He and I have 7 books written together, and I think overall, I think when the Gulp came out, that was number 24. I think
24.
So yeah, so I guess like 17 of my own, and another 7 with Dave. So far, always working on stuff. We're working on the next Sam Aston book at the moment, and then, as I mentioned before, we'll get back to the new novel right after that. So, yeah.
So, you're constantly writing. You've got you've got 24 books out there now. How many books do you have in the in the waiting to be published? I mean, how many projects do you work on at once?
All right. Well, at the moment, so just for right now, I've got a whole heap of notes for the second set of stories set in the Gulp. I'm working on the 3rd Sam Aston book right now with Dave. That's the current project. I've got a novel that's out on submission to publishers at the moment, and the other novel that's written that I need to get back to after I finish the one with Dave. So there's four books sort of currently in some stage of either being written or being shot. And then, of course, the list of things to move on to once we move those off the desk.
An interesting question that I was asked was if I work on one book at a time when I'm working on stuff, and I've got a whole pile of books I need to get out. I've got 3 books published, so I mean, I'm an idiot. I've got a bunch of short story things and whatever, but I took 2020 and just kind of sat down. It's like, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. And then I lost myself in 5 different projects. And I mean, it was really dumb. I didn't maximize my time the way I should have. So, I mean, but I mean, who cares? It'll all come out at some point in time, but I mean, I'm not in a real big rush, but, so they asked me if I worked on one project at a time, finished it, and then go to the next. And I explained what an idiot I am as far as doing that and how it's really screwed up my entire year. I haven't released anything since January of 2020. Gonna fix that very soon. But how do you work? I mean, do you work on multiple projects at the same time? And if you do, how do you manage that?
Sort of, but not literally at the same time. So there's a finished book that's out being shot, hopefully, looking for a home right now. I'm currently working on the next Sam Aston book, so that's the only thing that I'm actually writing. I might sort of break and write short stories in between sometimes, just because I need a break from the sort of brain strain of working on a novel. But I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where quite often I get asked for stories for various anthologies or projects. So when those things come up, I drop out and make space for those. But otherwise, I'm only working on one book at a time in the case of literally writing it. But at this point in time, I'm writing Sam Aston 3. I've got a finished book to go back to when I finish Sam Aston 3, and I'm making notes for the next set of stories in the Gulp that I'll get to when I finish that novel.
Okay.
By the time I get to writing those stories for the next set of stories of the Gulp, I will probably be sort of making notes for the next project as I go along. So
Okay.
I kind of like to let things sort of ruminate, and I don't plan in great detail. When I work with Dave, we work together. There's two of us got to stay on the same page, so we plan in a lot more detail. But for my own stuff, I don't do a lot of planning, but I do write a lot of notes and just ideas and things, and kind of slowly knock them into shape. And so I'm usually focused on writing on one project, but making a lot of notes for another project. So by the time I get to that, I've been making those notes for a while, and somewhere in the subconscious, that thing has been growing and fermenting, and so by the time I come to actually write it and I look through those notes, I've got some subconscious understanding of where I'm going to go with it. So usually these days, when I start a new book, I'm not really going in cold. It's something I've been thinking about for a while before I get to it.
Mm-hmm. So, so you're kind of a pantser when you do your own stuff, kind of. I mean, it sounds like you.
Yeah, I call myself a signpost writer more than that, because I don't sort of plan out in detail, but I put a bunch of signposts that kind of point the way where I'm going, and I want to get from that one to that one to that one.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to get there. It's just, okay, that starts, and then I want this to happen, and maybe a bit later that'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then those are the sort of notes, and then I find my way between the signposts, sort of pantsing the gaps. Sure. I think the whole pantser planner thing is a bit like a sliding scale. You've got the 100% planners over here and pure pantsers over here. And most of us are somewhere along that scale.
Right.
And quite often it will change from book to book. Some books I'll plan a bit more detail. Some things I'll just dive headlong in. And it tends to vary from project to project. And often by the time I'm halfway through a project, the second half of it, I might find I'm planning in a bit more detail, because I've got a good idea what I'm doing, where the story's going, and I just kind of need to stay on top of what's happening. So yeah, I find it changes a lot.
Mm-hmm. I did the wonderful thing of I wrote 3 novels, and then the first one was like, I can do better than that. So I rewrote it, and I killed somebody I shouldn't have, because they showed up in the next book. It's like, oh crap, and then you had to rewrite it, and it's like, oh god, what a mess. Yeah. And it's like, all right, cool.
The knock-on echoes that go through. I got into, when I wrote the Alex Caine series, which is a sort of a dark urban fantasy trilogy for HarperVoyager. That was a while ago now, back at nearly 10 years ago, I started writing that. I quickly learned that a Bible, what I call a series Bible or a novel Bible, is really important. So as soon as I start working on a project now, every place, every main occurrence, every character, whatever, I drop into the Bible for that series or that story. So I've got a list of characters and places and all the descriptions and all that stuff there, so that I can go back and see what's what. And whenever I kill anyone in a series or in a book, I keep them in the Bible, but I just do the strike through on their paragraph. So it's really obvious when you're sort of going through and you look, oh shit, that guy's dead. So, if I might have forgotten that he came to some sticky end, and then I'm, double checking on the character. Okay, well, he's dead. I don't know where, maybe, but so you go back and track it down. And so I find that these I have a sort of an individual file for each book, and then I have an overall file if it's a series for the whole series. And I learned the hard way, because I was on book 3 of the Alex Caine series when I realized I needed a lot more information, and I had to go back and build that up before I could finish book 3. And that taught me, so now right from the outset, every new book, every new story, keep the notes right from the start.
That sounds like a really great way of doing things. I should start doing that someday.
Yeah, I recommend it.
I was sitting up late at night, and it's like, you're reading through it. It's like, okay, I changed this. And, oh, you know what? It'd be perfect if this guy just dies right now. And so I wrote it and, finished up. And then I got to the next book. It's like, okay, let's rewrite this. Oh, crap. He's in chapter 3. Oh, no, he's in chapter 5. Oh, okay. So that's a complete rewrite. Oh, and you paint yourself into corners that all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm such an idiot. That's
And
what I love
sometimes
about
that's the
this.
fun, though.
It
Yeah, I mean,
is,
sometimes
but
that's fun. I kind of, when I realized, shit, what am I going to do now? It's like, okay, well, now I need to figure a way out of this. And then that kind of often makes interesting story because it's a little bit less by the numbers. Because if you kind of literally don't know what you're doing yourself, you surprise yourself. Hopefully you surprise readers too.
I actually flipped a coin and said, okay, am I going to resurrect them or am I going to rewrite the book? Oh, damn, rewrite the book. Okay. So I could just add a little section in there and kind of Frankenstein his butt, but I didn't.
Yeah, you could. Probably the better decision in the long run.
It was, but I was really looking for fate to give me the easy way out.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
No. If there's an easy way and a hard way, the hard way is usually better.
Usually. I'm still looking for the easy way, but we'll see. We'll see how that works. My editor will kick my ass if I do it the easy way, though.
Yeah, exactly.
He'll jerk that entire he'll jerk that entire chapter out, no problem, with an absence of malice like you've never seen, and say, okay, rewrite this. Oh,
yeah.
But that's all right. That's all right. So what else is going on? I see you have some hobbies that you either do or used to do, and one of them being you teach Kung Fu.
Yeah, that's not really a hobby. That's the job. I kind of have two full-time jobs really in that respect. So the writing is one thing that fills up most of my time, and the other thing that fills up most of my time is running a Kung Fu school. I've been a martial artist since I was knee high.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something I've always done. And when I was first in Australia, I lived in Sydney for a long time, and then we moved a couple of hours out of the city, south down the coast. And when I was still in Sydney for many years, I helped run my teacher school, and then I ran my own school in one of the suburbs. And then when we moved down here, I set up a new school down here, and so and now I'm part of a small group of people responsible for taking care of the style and the system. And so I run my school, but we're also sort of responsible for the other instructors of the style around the world, and kind of keep an eye on things and keep the legacy going. That's the idea.
Oh, sure. So with COVID, I assume that you had to close down at some point in time, or were you okay?
Yeah, well, Australia's been in a much better position than a lot of other places. No thanks to the actual Prime Minister, but the state premiers really kind of listened to the science and locked in, and we're in a really good place, generally speaking. But for the first half of last year, when everything really kicked in, which was another reason I couldn't concentrate on the big novel projects, and ended up writing the Gulp, was part from the fact that there was lockdown and my son was homeschooling. I also had to figure out how to run my classes through Zoom, because everything got shut for several months. So that was something I had to sort of learn to figure out. But then by the second half, I think July or August maybe, last year, we were allowed to start in-person classes again with restricted numbers and restricted contact for most of last year. And now we're more, there's still certain restrictions in place and certain things we've got to be careful of, but we're not far off sort of back to a relatively normal state of affairs now. So yeah, we're in a pretty good place. I mean, always on the lookout, every once in a while there's a breakout and things shut down again, and they do these kind of what they call circuit breaker lockdowns. Like Melbourne's doing one right now. They're just that's my dog scratching. Sorry if you can hear a ringing sound. He's busily scratching his collar. They do these circuit breakers, so they'll just go into a hard lockdown for 5 straight days, just pin it down. Nobody goes anywhere, and they trace the cases and then things get back to normal pretty quickly, rather than letting it go out of control. So that happens from time to time.
Right.
But we're actually in a pretty good position on that front. So mostly we can do what we normally do. What we can't do is that obviously we often have seminars, international seminars or stuff, where we might go and teach the instructors in other countries, or every 2 years, normally we all go to China, all the senior instructors go to China and train together with our teachers, keep our skills up. So all that stuff, off the cards for the indefinite future, and until things change. But on a sort of day-to-day basis, for us, we're in a pretty good state.
Yeah, I know a lot of gym owners, and it, for the most part, it spans a lot of different martial arts. that, I mean, basically this last year has killed them. They're not even sure they can get their students back, the way that they had to close down and the extended close down, and then they're able to open a little bit. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gyms, how do you do that? No contact, that's,
Yeah, exactly.
that kind of stuff. I can see where you could do Zoom, but I bet you that was tough.
Oh man, I said to my students after the start of last year, I said, if we end up in another big lockdown, then I'm just going to suck it up and shut down for a few months, because doing Zoom, it was my classes, most classes are usually a 2-hour class. And when we were on Zoom, I was doing 1-hour Zoom classes. And 1 hour of Zoom was way harder work than 2 hours in person. It was.
Oh, I bet.
And the other side of it as well was because I kind of live in the country. I'm surrounded by dairy paddocks. And, we're on a slow ADSL internet connection and stuff like that. So I would have to go into the studio where I teach, where it's in town, where there's broadband, and set up there. So I had the bandwidth to do Zoom. So I would have to sort of pack up my gear, go into the studio, set up, do the class, take it all down and come back again.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was in and out several times a week doing that and teaching through Zoom. And it was exhausting. And it takes a lot more mental and physical energy to run a class sort of on your own, watching a screen with all the sort of students spread out and trying to communicate with people. So it kind of kept us afloat during that first lockdown. But I said to them that I'm just going to suck it up and take the hit. If it comes up again, it's just too much work. We're gonna go on hiatus if there's another long lockdown.
I can't imagine doing that, because I mean, if you're in a classroom, you got 30 people lined up. You show them something, then you can walk around and you can see from various angles. No, you're too low, you're too high, whatever you're doing. On Zoom, you only have one angle. That just seems like, oh my God, that'd be tough. Did you have them like turn and stuff?
Yeah.
Or
Sometimes, and sometimes people would have an iPad that's like standing like this, so you can see this much of them and the ceiling fan, and you can't see the rest of them.
Right.
It's like people will be at home. So some of them would be in a room like this. They got hardly any room. Other people would be in a garage. Some people would have it set up on the back deck, so they'd have the whole garden. But trying to sort of keep track of what people are doing and watch where they are. More than anything else, it became sort of a placeholder just to run them through drills and things without really paying too much attention to actually sort of teaching them or improving them, but just to kind of keep them engaged in what was going on. It was good for them to have that distraction and that practice and to stay in touch, with their hobby, with their art. But yeah, there was very little in the way of. I was not really teaching anything new during that whole time.
Yeah.
I was drilling people through what they already knew and kind of.
How many students came up with brand new moves that they invented themselves during lockdown?
Yeah, we had a few things to correct since we've been back to class. Yeah, no, you can't do that. That's not right.
Oh, you should see this. This is going to be unstoppable. No, it's not. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No. Don't do that. Look at your balance. Oh, nope. Sorry. Well, that's all kind of fun. That's all kind of fun. Do you do any?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. I get to do what I love. I write and I do martial arts. Those are the big loves of my life, and I'm in a position to do that. But we're never going to be super rich unless I manage to hit a few bestsellers. And but I'm very lucky to do things I love. So we work our asses off to get in this position. But yeah, it's good. No complaint.
But on the other hand, enjoying life is way more important than having a pile of cash.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would love to be a little bit less cash poor. I'd love to be able to pay the bills without quite so much kind of anxiety every month, but I wouldn't switch this.
Yeah. Unless, of course, like you said, you get those bestsellers and all of a sudden, you're just throwing it out like it's raining,
Yeah. I'll be happy to accept that state of affairs.
Well, I don't know too many people that have martial arts gyms that make a lot of money on that. So, I mean, you've picked two very interesting careers.
Yeah, my wife is an artist. She's a painter. So.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, between the three things that we do, we get by, but we got three things that rarely pay, great sums of money. And our system of martial, because my wife runs the Kung Fu school with me as well.
Okay.
And it's a very traditional style and a traditional school. So, you can make more money if you really commercialize these things. But, that's what we call McDojos. That's like, you can roll people through, you can guarantee black belts, you can bang, 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 push things and but that's not what we do. We teach a very traditional system that's got a very strong history.
Well,
it's not easy.
And the McDojos always have, 17 more belts than everybody else does, and they have belt testing once a month, and it's, it's $100 to get your purple 3-striped, 1 green stripe belt. I mean, I think karate is probably worse than anybody, but maybe kung fu's bad at it too. I mean, but McDojo.
Every style has variations. There are karate schools that are really sort of legit and traditional and do things the right way, and there are McDojos in every style. But
there's an American karate dojo that I thought it was funny. They have a child's class, and they've got 13 belts to black belt. Then you progress to you're a white belt in the teen division. So you progress, and they got another 13 belts. And then once you hit 18, now you're a white belt in the adult division. And it just like, good Lord. I mean, that's 40 belts. And then you have your
how they monetize. They charge you $50 or $100 every time you test, and 40 big payday.
Yeah, and
everybody wants their black belt, so people pay through the nose. If you guarantee, you get styles where they say, I can't guarantee a black belt in 2 years, I can't guarantee a black belt in 10 years, because everyone's different, and people need to train until they're good enough. But you get these styles where they say, we guarantee a black belt in 2 years. It doesn't matter if you're shit. What they'll do is they'll test you every 3 months, and they'll charge you $100 each time you do it.
Right.
And they'll churn out a black belt 2 years later. Downside to that then is that person goes thinking, hey, I'm hot shit, I'm a black belt, and they go and open a school, and then they teach the same watered down rubbish and churn out their own black belts, and so it kind of devalues everything. But that's a commercial result of living in a capitalist world. It's the same with pretty much anything. You find you go to a restaurant for a good meal, or you go to McDonald's, it's the same thing.
Tell you kind of a funny, real quick short story. MMA gym. Guy walks in, he said, and he's talking about how well trained he is and everything. Goes through warm up. He can't do a jumping jack. His like arms and legs just aren't working together, and he's just whatever. So it comes to time to hit the bags, and I was watching him, and he's hitting the bag like there's no hit, there's nothing in this punch. I mean, it's just like and it's a straight line punch, and it's okay. You watch some video or something like that, you've never actually hit anything with any weight. Okay. And as we're sitting there and we're getting ready to spar, he wants to spar, and we're like, no, I don't think so. He said, oh, it's okay, I've got a black belt. He didn't say he was a black belt, he said he got a black belt.
He bought one online.
Yeah. Absolutely, he bought one online. He bought it on Amazon. It was hilarious. And so the guy that owned the gym, he said, well, I'll spar with you, and it wasn't anything. And he said, well, and he just showed up for that one time because he wanted to say, I've trained in an MMA gym.
Yeah,
that's all he wanted to do.
I think it was Hoist Gracie who said, one of the Gracies, I think, who said, a black belt covers 2 inches of your ass, and the rest of it's up to you. So
pretty much.
That's always worth bearing in mind. It doesn't matter what you got around your waist. It's like you can be naked or a 3-piece suit, whatever you like. If you can't deliver, you can't deliver. So.
Yeah. So I want to fast forward a year. We have a cage fight in a bar. Okay, so we set up a cage, and this guy comes in and he wants to actually fight in the cage, and he's got somebody that a gym that said, yeah, he can fight, beginner, amateur level, or whatever. And all he wanted to do is just get in the cage. And so somehow he got himself in the cage. The other guy is wearing shin guards. He's wearing everything because he knows this guy isn't, all that great. He does this really weak, just a circle kick. just to kind of wave his foot in front of his face, and the guy ducks into it and he gets knocked out. Has this huge black eye. He stepped into this, and the guy's like, oh my gosh, did I kill him? Type thing. They wake him up and they get him up and put him out there. 2 hours later, I'm at the bar having a beer with some of the fighters. And he's sitting there at the end talking to this girl saying, yeah, I'm a cage fighter. It's like, oh my gosh. I got a black belt. Yeah.
Some people, that's what there are those people out there, they just want to add to a list of things they can say they are or say they do. And often, from pragmatically speaking, when you run a school, you've got to pay the bills, you've got to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time, your bread and butter comes from people who are real hobbyists who just want to some people, they just want something to do for a bit of fun. Some people, they just want to say that they do this thing, and that's okay, because you got to pay your rent, and you always keep an eye out for that handful of people that have got the real mindset for it. They're dedicated. They really want to understand and get good, and
right.
You can't run a school with just those people because there's just not enough of them. So yeah, it's a balancing act, but it's also always worth trying to remind people a little bit of putting the ego in check and having a bit of humility about what it is that they're doing.
There's something about safety that just
yeah.
But I think it's I have no experience with kung fu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, that type of stuff, MMA, but there's always those people that's just like, you're gonna die. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Something, but yeah, you take their money. You have to.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we teach a very traditional system. There's very much teaching with application in mind. If I can't explain to you what it's for, then I'm not going to bother teaching it, because you got to be able to use what you do. And a lot of people, they sort of self-reject from classes when they realize that the training is hard work. The understanding needs to be there. You need to drill. You need to do this stuff. A lot of people think, if I come here, you'll tell me the secret and I'll be a martial artist. And it's like, well, for one, it's not secret. It's just understanding. And for two, yeah, I can tell you in, half a minute how to throw a perfect punch. You've got to go away and do that 10,000 times against the bag before you're any good at it. Just because you understand it doesn't mean I can do the work for you.
Right.
That tends to sort of filter out a lot of people anyway. When you teach and you focus on doing stuff properly, people a lot of the time are like, well, fuck, this is hard work. I might it works,
Wow, it didn't look this hard when Chuck Norris did it. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, why that person makes it look so easy? It's not because they know secrets. It's because they trained their ass off for years.
Well,
I get all the time people in class, they say, you make it look so easy. And it's like, well, I've done it before thousands and thousands of times. This is the first time you saw it. So,
well, yeah. I ran into people that talked about Chuck Norris as being a really good actor. And it's like, you realize after Korea, he was in competition for years, and if it wouldn't have been for Bruce Lee, probably
he was a karate champion in his youth before he started acting, I think.
Yeah.
So, you know what? Funny story. Do you know how small Chuck Norris is?
Yes, I've met him.
I had no idea. It blew my mind. I was at a convention a couple of years ago. There's Supernova, a bit like Comic-Con, that kind of a thing. It's an Australian one called Supernova.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of the big international guests. And I saw he was on the same guest list as I was. I was there as one of the author guests. They have TV, movies, all that stuff, anime and voiceover. It's cool. And you get to hang out with all these people.
Yeah.
And I saw Chuck Norris was on the guest list, and it's like, oh wow, no way, I'm going to get to meet Chuck Norris. And then the first time I saw him, I inadvertently just laughed in his face because I had no idea. Like, I've only ever seen him in the movies and stuff. And then I was coming out of the green room to go back to the signing table, and coming towards me with these two great big huge kind of bodyguard dudes with this little old dude in between. He's like 5 foot fucking nothing.
Yeah.
And he came walking towards me, and I was like, oh, I wonder who that is. And as he got a bit closer, suddenly realized, shit, that's Chuck Norris. And I just kind of barked and laughed, like inadvertently. It's like, holy crap, Chuck Norris is tiny.
Yep.
And then, sort of tried not to draw too much attention. I just laughed in his face and just sort of said a quick hello as we passed in the corridor. But yeah, I was astounded. I had no idea. And now every time I see Chuck Norris in any movie, or you get reruns of Texas Ranger and all that stuff, you can't help but notice the camera angle is always set to make sure that he doesn't look as small as he is. I had no idea.
Yeah, we were our karate school went up to Fargo, North Dakota. I grew up in South Dakota, and he had it was 89, 90, I think it was 90 or 91. And he had a big seminar up there. So I got within about 8 foot of him, and it's like, it kind of looked at. So when I say I met him, I saw him really up close, I guess would be a better thing. He said something, and I had my absolute chance to talk to him, and I choked. I just somebody else talked to him. Yeah, come on up here. I was like, fuck, but yeah, so that's my brush with Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Anyway,
very good enough, really. I mean, he's just another guy, right?
Oh yeah, he was extremely nice. I mean, I didn't see him putting on airs or anything like that. I mean, I thought he was really nice throughout the entire seminar and everything, but it was just
talk to him just for a few minutes. I got to talk to him a bit later that weekend. He was just nice. He was just real nice, polite, friendly, almost sort of too friendly kind of thing. He was just one of those genuinely polite sort of guys who was just kind of walking his way through. But he's like, he's like 80 years old or something now. So must imagine he's tired of it all. He's just been through the motions that many times. Must be kind of over it by now. But
well, then he has exercise machines, and he had all this other stuff. And when you look at him, he's been around a long time. Like I said, he fought in Korea.
Yeah. Before I ever saw him in any movies or anything else, when I was just a kid training in martial arts, I would get the martial arts magazines, and he would always be on the back cover, kicking up in the air with his stretched jeans on. Yeah. Cold in a pair of jeans. It was always his, stretched jeans. I had no idea. And it said, world karate champion 1972 or whatever. I had no idea who the fuck it was.
Yeah, dude, I wanted a pair. I so wanted a pair of those jeans when I was growing up.
Oh man, yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, they stretch, and I thought for sure I'd be able to raise my leg that high if I bought a pair of these jeans. Guess what? Doesn't work that way.
No, you got to put in the work.
Yeah, but I still can't lift my leg that high. Anyway, that's why I grapple. Anyway, or I used to. Unfortunately, that's hard on the hips. So.
Yeah, a lot of it is knees, hips, and elbows, man.
Yep. That's why they have replacements, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Alan, is there anything else you want to tell your readers or fans or anything before we sign off on this?
No, not really. Just check out my stuff and hit me up online. Come and have a chat on Twitter. I'm always around.
Twitter. All right. Yeah. And I'll
that tends to be my media of choice.
What's that?
That tends to be my social media of choice. I spend more time on Twitter than anything else. I enjoy that interaction.
Do you?
So yeah, I'm always around on there, just under my name.
I will put your website and also your social media links in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, they certainly can. And links to your books and whatever else I can scurry up. But you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, sir. I appreciate you coming on the show.
No worries. It's been fun. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. With that, I'm going to call the show to a close. This is Jeff with the DIY Writer Podcast. Alan, thanks for your time. I want everybody to have a great day and keep your chin up. Bye-bye.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber, and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me, please.